BFM stands for Basic Fighter Maneuvers, but don't let the name fool you. They don't seem very basic when you're trying to learn to fly them, nor when you try to apply them in rapid succession during an air combat mission. There are many BFMs, but we'll only examine 5 of the most common ones: the low yo-yo, or acceleration maneuver, the high yo-yo, the scissors, the Immelman turn, and the quarter plane maneuver. We will look at each maneuver separately, discussing when we might use it and what its use tells the controller. We're then going to examine what happens to the human in that fighter during these gyrations. I hope you brought along an air sickness bag. The first maneuver is the low yo-yo maneuver. In this case, your fighter is rolling in on his target. He's got too great a distance and not enough overtake to get into firing parameters. So he'll push his nose down, accelerate unloaded, pick up a little more speed, pull back into his target's plane, and in the position to fire. The low yo-yo he uses a cutoff heading, and it's normally used in a turning fight to try to cut the target off. Another maneuver is the high yo-yo. On the other hand, when you have too much overtake or overshoot, what you've got to do is to negate that. In the high yo-yo, your airplane he's coming in, he's got too much closure, so he'll pull his nose up, but to keep his eyes on the target, he'll roll so his canopy is facing the target, bleed off airspeed, and then pull back in on the target's tail. The high yo-yo just simply bleeds off speed, negates the closure that he's got, and he rolls, zooms high, and then puts his nose back on the bandit. For the scissors turn, the scissors is something that results when one or the other aircraft is already into an overshoot situation. The aircrafts are almost canopy to canopy when it starts, and what they'll do, they'll do a series of reversals, rolling canopy to canopy, each aircraft trying to negate the other aircraft's turns. They're trying to force the other aircraft to overshoot, staying canopy to canopy, trying to keep their eyes on each other. Now, in this case, the aircraft with the ability to fly slowest and load the greatest number of Gs is the aircraft that's going to win out, because sooner or later in one of these reversals, he's going to force that opponent out in front of him just enough to pull in behind him, get a firing position. The next maneuver is the Immelman turn. This maneuver was perfected back in World War I by a man named Immelman. In this case, the classic Immelman, the enemy is coming head on. But in most cases, this is not going to happen. But you've got normally a front quartering aspect on the target. Your target needs to be high. You've got to have a lot of speed, and you want to be at least 5,000 to 8,000 feet below your target. Your aircraft will go nose down. He initiates way out of quite a distance, pushes his nose down, picks up a lot of speed, pulls up into his target. He essentially does half of a loop, and then he goes into half of a roll to roll in behind his enemy, getting firing position. And on your radar scope, what happens is your friendly fighter appears to stop and in reverse directions on your radar scope. The last maneuver is the quarter plane maneuver. In this case, you've got not only excessive overtake or closure, you've also got a poor nose position. You're coming in on the guy, and you really don't have a good nose position. You're liable to overshoot in front of him. So what the fighter does in this case, he'll push his nose down, fly under the target's path, therefore he can keep his canopy facing him, keep his eyes on the target. He'll pull up into something like a loop, getting above the target. He'll go high on him, keeping his canopy facing the target. Then he'll roll, and normally your target is going to be in a tight turn trying to negate this. He just simply rolls with the target, rolls far enough, and pulls back down into the target's plane into firing position. As I said, this is a last-ditch maneuver. This one is very hard to effect, and you're dependent upon your target being fairly predictable in holding his turn rate. Now that we've seen what the airplane goes through in chasing the bad guys, let's look briefly at what happens to the man inside. We should perhaps review some basic equipment used in current fighter aircraft. The purpose of this review is to acquaint you with the aircrew tools of the trade, and secondly, to begin the chain of events that are necessary for a backseat orientation flight for those controllers with a current physiological training certificate, or chamber card as you might call it. This chain of events will also include a pre-flight orientation at the fighter squadron covering ejection seat procedures, emergency aircrew actions, and ejection simulator training. Now let's talk about some equipment. The proper fit of helmet and G-suit may not win an aerial battle, but it can keep us from losing one. Start at the top with the helmet. There are 3 standard sizes. Unfortunately, not all heads come in these standard sizes. So the method of accommodation is to take a helmet that is slightly larger than the head and use foam pads to fit the helmet to the individual. The helmet is fitted in a 1G environment, and when G loadings in excess of 1 are experienced, the foam filling may compress and it leaves the helmet loose on your head. This is not good. The point is, if you think you'll have to hold or readjust your helmet during high G maneuvers, you should have the helmet refitted. This may prevent a loss of tally-ho under high G conditions. Also, a properly adjusted nape strap and chin strap will contribute to minimizing helmet slippage during high G conditions. Whether the visor is worn up or down is a matter of personal preference, and it's based on weather and visibility conditions. In either case, ensure that it is securely tightened so there's no distracting movement during an engagement. For controllers flying only occasionally, you must obviously use whatever equipment you have available. If, upon trying the helmet on, you find that movement is really excessive, have the personal equipment people try to refit it for you, and they can add or remove pads as appropriate. Working downward, the next piece of gear which is attached to the helmet is the oxygen mask. The primary purpose of this piece of equipment is to sustain life at altitude. But remember, in this case, bigger is not necessarily better. A mask that is too large will be difficult to see over, reducing your downward visibility. And also, it'll place the mic too far from your lips. Since the mask tends to sag under G's, it should be tightened as securely as possible. Now, this will facilitate verbal communications in a high G environment. When you smile, the mask should smile with you, thus preventing the rubber muzzle from slipping down over your mouth, making it difficult to call something like Fox 2 or reattacking. The same problem of refit occurs here as with the helmet. Get it adjusted to your face if it is extremely loose or tight.